Oops, I did it again. I played with your heart. The title's clickbait. Oh baby, baby. Hello fellow heroes of the blue and welcome to my channel, and also welcome to another technique video. And since the first one went so well, I decided to make one that has been again highly requested, and that is how to correctly apply contrast paint so you get the best surface possible. And for this I have my Space Marine here because I think they are one of the most challenging minis to get a smooth result. So let's get cracking. So as you can see, I use my wet palette for my contrast paints as well as for my regular acrylics. And the reason is, well, it's mainly convenience really. I don't want to have two different palettes here, and you don't really need them because you are just going to use the contrast paints immediately, and once you are done with them, you're usually not going to go back to that same pool because you have already applied that area. So with that detail out of the way, I'm going to show you how I mix my paints. As you all may already know, I have all my contrast paints in dropper bottles. There are a couple of reasons. First of all, you don't really want to put your nice brush and dip it into a pot of paint. If you put your paint into a palette, you will control much better how much paint is in your brush. And second reason why I have them in droppers is because I can mix them with high precision. And I use a lot of mixes, and for my red, my favorite red mix is 1 part Flestirus red and 1 part Blood Angels red. If I do it with a brush, I will never get the same mix every single time, and instead if I use droppers, I can just do 2 drops of Flestirus, 2 drops of Blood Angels, and they will always be perfect. One very important thing with contrast paints is that you mix them very well. Some of them, maybe not the reds are pretty good for this, but some of them, like Space Wolf's Grey or Apothecary White, they have a kind of a powdery residue that deposits on the bottom, and if you don't mix it with the rest of the paint, it's not going to leave a very good result. So you want to be sure there is no residue on the bottom, and I like to use a vortex mixer, and this is the result post vortex mixer. This is very important because otherwise you may not get the desired effect. So mixing them is pretty simple if you use droppers, and if you don't have droppers, I highly recommend you get some pipettes for this task. And that's it. To apply contrast paints, I like to use a large brush. Well, this is not like massive, but I have here 2 examples of the kind of brush I would use. Nothing smaller than this really, except for the tiniest details. But you want a big brush. This is equivalent to a size 4 rosemary if you are curious. And this is my old rosemary here, the size 3. A very important thing about the brush that you use is that, look, this is a dry brush. This has been sitting here for a couple of days without use, and you don't want this. If you put contrast paints here, or any paint really, it's going to absolutely go into the ferrule and it's going to destroy the brush. So what you want to do is have this brush moist. Not soaking wet, but just load the ferrule with water, so when contrast paints get in there, they can't go all the way back because there is water, and also if there is water, this is going to be easier for them to get out of there once you rinse your brush. So what you want to do is load your brush as much as possible. Be sure to mix both those colors very well. Look at how much paint I have in here, and you have to concentrate in sections. So I'm going to concentrate in this lower section of the leg first. And as you see, I am applying the paint thickly, quite thickly. I'm not going to bother about pooling now. I'm going to bother about that when I'm done with this. As you see, I'm recharging my brush quite often, so I have a lot of paint in it. And this is what you want really, because if you have a lot of paint in your brush, it has enough strength, like the gravity and the surface tension, to smooth out that paint by itself really. Once I've applied it to the section that I want, I'm going back with a clean brush again, and I'm going to absorb all the undesired pooling that we may have. For example, here you can see if you are quick, you can just smooth out that super well. For example, you can see there, very ugly pooling, just touch it with the tip of my brush and it disappears, and the paint levels itself pretty well. Here we absorbed the paint here, but it's still pulling down, still leveling itself, so we need to go back and keep babysitting this until we are sure that there are no more ugly pools of paint. There will be a point where the paint starts to dry. It's starting to happen here on the knee pad, so you don't want to touch the paint anymore now. If you do it, you're going to ruin the result. On top of the leg, I'm going to do the shoulder pad, because shoulder pads can be quite tricky, and I think this would be a good example to showcase this. I'm going to apply a lot of paint, moving my brush from the top to the bottom, so more paint naturally deposits there. When you are doing a brush stroke, more paint will deposit towards the end of the brush stroke, so we want to move the brush in the correct direction. And once I apply it, I'm going to go back, as I did before, and reabsorb any excess. And again, this will settle through time, so we absorb it here first, it's pulled again, so we will move it again. So there you go, pretty smooth result in what's probably the most difficult section of a Space Marine. So for demonstration purposes, I'm going to do what I think most people do. I'm not there with you, so I don't really know what you're doing, but a lot of people that have troubles, I think this is the main issue they are having. So I'm going to take my Zero from Raphael, so a smaller brush, and I'm going to load it as I would load the brush for a normal acrylic paint. And then I'm going to try to paint the same shoulder pad. Even moving my brush fast, there are areas of lighter and darker pigments. There's nothing I can do to fix this, because if I touch it, it's going to be worse. This is the best that it's going to look. So let me talk about another technique. This is feathering. This is something that I use a lot, and for me this is an integral part of painting with contrast paints, because you can do super cool effects with this. And I'm going to showcase it here on the sword using the same paints. As before, I'm going to load my brush with a mix. The technique is very simple. I'm going to apply it, I'm going to clean my brush very quickly, and I'm going to, just with the water that's left on the brush, feather it out into the rest of the sword. You can use two brushes for this if you don't feel like you are fast enough, but you shouldn't need it, at least in my weather. Might be the possibility that if you live in a very dry weather, you won't be able to move back and forth in time that the paint starts to dry. So yeah, there's nothing you can do there really. But in normal conditions, you should be able to do just this. There you go. As you can see, super cool gradient in seconds, just by feathering out the contrast paint onto the primer. This is a fantastic technique that you should learn. Sadly, there is no tricks for this, it's just being quick between cleaning and applying. As you can see, I did several passes of this, so I went and applied once, cleaned my brush again, repeated again, and if you are fast enough and as you are wetting the surface, the paint is not going to dry, and you can do it as many times as you need to get the smooth result. So guys, this is it really. This is the main technique and the main, well, you can call it trick if you want, on how to apply contrast paints in the smoothest way possible. And again, I showcase it in what's considered, or what at least what I consider the hardest mini possible, in infantry scale, of course, which is a Space Marine, to show you that it's 100% possible to apply contrast paints as smoothly if you use the correct technique. So as I said guys, thank you very much for watching. I really hope this was useful for you, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye. I would like to take a brief moment to thank my very lovely Patreons and channel members for letting me do the things that I love and for being just the best bunch of people you can imagine. And a special thank you to Heather Amster, Ramos Mundi, Nicolas Fournier, Brian Bledsoe, LMAP Limited, Tyrannosaur, Carlos Rivera, Chris Goldenthal, Christoph Moret, Harry Mota, Kim Anderson, Michael Boye, Thomas Ostergaard, Tom Brand, Victor Domen, Dark Havok, Arundel, Charles Armitage, Chris Broga, Chris Fivey, Kieran O'Murtha, Chris Talios, Dan Mako, Darcy Farrar, Dr. B, Gareth Smith, Geoffrey Dell, George Royce, G-Force, Jack Scouten, Jamie Milligan, Joe Simpson, JT Butler, Kevin Mian, Kevin Sullerson, Nat Lindemann, Mark Jarvis, Natius Maximus, One Brass Stroke Bearer, Oscar Jonathan Thornberg, Roger Nilsson, Samuel Sasa Park, and Tasted for being the coolest persons in the planet. Be like these fine folks on my Patreon and take control.